The cold November rain drummed on the roof of the old garage, sounding almost like music to me. I sat on the creaky stool, checking the digital thermohygrometer, the device that monitors temperature and humidity. 70 degrees Fahrenheit and 45% humidity, the perfect conditions for whatever was hiding behind the false wall. Odell Lamont, I muttered, looking at my wrinkled hands. 74 years old, retired, former restorer, and now just an old man who his own daughter considers a burden. I closed the control panel with the small key and tucked it into the pocket of my tattered sweater. It had been over 30 years since I'd created this vault, and in all that time not a single person had guessed what was stored here. The creak of the garage door made me wince. I hurriedly turned the lever that put the false panel back in place, masking the thermohygrometer, and grabbed the nearest screwdriver, pretending to fix an old radio. "Daddy, are you chilling here again?" Beverly's voice sounded annoyed as it always did lately. "Just minding my own business." I kept my eyes on the radio, which was long gone, but it was a good cover. "You're 74 years old. What business could you possibly have?" Beverly stepped closer, her thin heels clacking on the concrete floor of the garage. "We need money, Daddy." I lost again. I slowly put the screwdriver down and looked at my daughter. In her 45 years, Beverly looked like a life-weary woman with an unhealthy glint in her eyes that appeared whenever she talked about gambling. Her pale face, dyed hair, cheap clothes that were once expensive. Everything about her screamed of the addiction that was slowly eating away at her life. "I can't help you anymore, Beverly. My pension is barely enough for my medication." "What about this?" She put her hand around the garage. "How many times have I told you to sell this junk? It's nothing but old junk." I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. If only she knew that behind those peeling paint walls was a fortune that could solve all her problems. But I didn't trust Beverly. I never had since her addiction manifested itself. "This garage is the only thing I have left from my old life," I said quietly. "I'm not selling it." Beverly snorted. "The old life? Who needs it, your old life? You were just a restorer in some shitty gallery, not a Rembrandt." Her words hurt me, though I'd long since gotten used to being treated that way. I may not have been a great artist, but I knew art. I knew it well enough to recognize an original Caravaggio when it fell into my hands. Mentally, I went back 35 years to that little gallery in Baltimore where I worked as a restorer. Archibald Wells, one of our clients, had gone bankrupt and couldn't pay for the restoration of several paintings. "Take this copy as payment," he said then, handing me a canvas wrapped in a coarse cloth. "It's a good copy of Caravaggio's Martyrdom of St. Matthew. Not the original, of course, but it's masterful 19th century workmanship. At least it'll pay for your labor." I took the painting more out of pity for Wells than out of interest. But when I unrolled the canvas in my studio, something about the painterly style made me wary. The copy was too good, too authentic for the 19th century. The technique, the brush strokes, even the craquelures, the tiny cracks in the paint layer, all pointed to a much earlier period. After a week of careful study, I realized it was not a copy. It is a variation of a famous painting created by Caravaggio himself. The master often made several versions of the same work, and this one was probably an early sketch or alternative version of the famous painting. I was almost certain I was right, but I didn't tell anyone, not even my then-wife Roxanne. My instincts told me to keep this discovery a secret. "Dad, are you even listening to me?" Beverly's voice brought me back to the present. "Sorry, I was thinking." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. "I'm telling you that Vince called. He's demanding money. I owe him 15 grand. Vince was Beverly's bookie, a man with a reputation that made me worry about my daughter's safety, despite our differences. I don't have that kind of money, you know that." "There's this garage," she exclaimed in despair. "Why are you being so stubborn? It's just an old building with junk in it." I looked at the wall behind which my treasure was hidden. After I realized the value of the painting, I had to create a safe storage for it. Using my knowledge of painting conservation, I installed a system to maintain a constant temperature and humidity. But the real challenge was to keep it all hidden from view. My old friend Bryson Tilney, a talented carpenter, came to the rescue. Together, we created a false wall with a clever mechanism that opened only with a certain sequence of actions. Behind the wall was a small but perfectly appointed storage garage where my painting has spent the last 3 decades. "This garage is not for sale, Beverly," I said firmly. Period. "But I need the money," she almost shouted, her eyes glittering feverishly. "Vince isn't kidding. He's already threatened me." "Maybe you should get help. There are support groups for people with gambling addictions." "Shut up." Beverly kicked the toolbox in anger, sending it flying across the garage. "I'm not addicted. I'm just unlucky. A couple more bets and I'll win it all back." I shook my head, hearing those familiar excuses. She'd been saying that for years, ever since she'd lost almost all of the one big winnings she'd used to buy the house. It was just the two of us now, after Roxanne had left me 20 years ago, unable to stand my obsession with art and that garage. "Beverly, I can't help you," I said tiredly. "I don't have any money." "What about your pension?" "It comes the day after tomorrow," she said with a pleading tone in her voice. "Please, Daddy, I only need 5,000. I'll get the rest somehow." 5,000? That's almost my entire pension for the month. What will I live on? "You can live more modestly," she shouted again. "What are your expenses? You hardly even leave the house." I sighed, feeling my anger rising in me. "No, Beverly, my pension is my money. I earned it through years of labor." Beverly looked at me with unconcealed hatred, her face contorted. You, she gasped with rage. "You've never been a real father to me. Always just your paintings, your precious work. And now you won't help your own daughter." "I've helped you many times," I replied quietly, "and every time you lost that money. Give me your pension or I'll kick you out." Beverly suddenly shouted, her voice breaking into a shriek. "This is my house. I can kick you out any time I want." I froze, looking at my daughter. In that moment, she looked like a stranger, a monster created by addiction. There was nothing left of the little girl I had once rocked on my lap. "Kick her out," I said calmly, rising from the stool. "I'll leave." My calmness only seemed to make her angrier. "What? You think I don't mean it? I'm not kidding, old man. Either the money or get out." "I hear you, Beverly." I headed out of the garage. "Give me a couple days to pack my things. I'll be gone." "A couple days?" She laughed. "You have until tomorrow, and you'll still pay back your pension for all the years you've lived here for free." I silently left the garage, leaving my daughter shouting after me. The rain intensified, but I did not hurry to take shelter in the house. The cold drops on my face seemed to clear my thoughts. A plan was already forming in my head. It was time to act. For 35 years, I'd kept my secret, guarding the treasure, never even trying to sell it or profit from it. Now it was time to use it, not for myself, but to teach it a lesson. I walked slowly toward the house, mentally making a list of things I needed to do. The first item was to call Noel Fontaine, my old friend and bookstore owner, the only person, other than the late Bryson, who knew about my secret. As I entered the house, I saw Beverly smoking nervously by the window. She threw me a scornful glance but said nothing. I made my way to my small room and pulled an old suitcase out of the closet. It was time to leave this house, where I was no longer considered a human being, but only a source of money for another bet. The morning fog shrouded the streets of Herndon as I stepped out of the cab in front of the old bookstore on Pine Street. The wooden sign that read Fontaine and Books creaked quietly in the wind. Behind the murky glass of the window were rows of books, arranged with the kind of love that only a true bibliophile can feel. I gripped the handle of the tattered suitcase that held my entire life, A few changes of clothes, a photo album, medications, and documents. Everything else I'd left behind at Beverly's house. Everything but my secret. The bell above the door jingled melodiously as I entered the shop. The smell of old books enveloped me like a warm blanket, making me feel safe and peaceful. I inhaled deeply of the aroma, a mixture of dust, printing ink, and history. Odell? Noel Fontaine's graying head appeared from behind a stack of books. "Oh my God, what's wrong? You look terrible." Noel was my age, but he looked younger. Tall, thin, with lively blue eyes and a neat beard. The only person I'd trusted completely and unconditionally for almost 40 years of our friendship. "She kicked me out, Noel," I said, dropping the suitcase to the floor. "Beverly demanded my pension and kicked me out of the house." Noel shook his head, sympathy in his eyes. "I warned you this would happen someday. Her addiction—" He didn't finish, instead stepping around the counter and hugging me tightly. "You're staying with me. That's not even up for discussion." "I don't want to be a burden." "Stop it," Noel interrupted me. "With Elizabeth gone, the apartment upstairs feels too empty. I'd be happy to have your company." I nodded gratefully. Noel's wife had died 3 years ago, and since then he had lived alone in the spacious apartment above the store, where I often came for chess and art talks. "Let's go upstairs," Noel said, taking my suitcase. "I'd just put the kettle on." We went up the narrow staircase to the apartment, a bright apartment filled with bookshelves and antique furniture. The smell of freshly brewed tea mingled with the cinnamon scent of fresh scones on the table. "Sit down," Noel pointed to a chair by the window, "and tell me what happened." Noel listened silently, occasionally shaking his head as I recounted the scandal with Beverly last night. He'd known my daughter since she was a child, and he was sad to see her transform from a bright, talented girl into a gambling addict. "What are you going to do with the painting?" he asked when I finished the story. "Is it still in the garage?" "Yes," I took a sip of tea. "The vault is secure. She wouldn't find it even if she tried to take the whole garage apart." "But you realize you can't just leave her there, right?" Noel leaned forward. "If Beverly sells the garage—" "She can't sell it," I set the cup on the table. "The garage is in my name. It's the only property I own. But you're right. It's time to act. I'm going to contact Winslow and arrange for an official appraisal of the painting." Winslow Callahan was a renowned expert on the Italian Baroque, whom I had met in my years as a restorer. He was one of the few people who had seen my painting, and was the first to confirm my suspicions about its authenticity. "Are you sure?" Noel looked surprised. "After all these years of keeping a secret?" "Yes," I said firmly. I had put off this decision for too long, perhaps out of fear or habit, but now I have no choice. Noel stroked his beard thoughtfully. "What about the will? Does it name Beverly as heir to the garage now?" "Yes," I nodded, "although the garage itself is worth almost nothing, an old building on the outskirts of town. But the painting, if Beverly somehow discovers its existence and value, she'll demand her share." "You could change the will," Noel suggested. "Just take the garage out of there." "And leave it to whom?" I grinned sadly. "I don't have anyone else." Noel looked at me calmly. "You can leave it to me if you want. Not because of the value of the garage, but to protect the painting. If anything happens to you, I'll make sure it gets into the right hands." I thought about it. It was a reasonable option. Noel was the one person I trusted completely. "Okay," I nodded. "I'll do that. Now we need to get in touch with Winslow." Noel pulled out his cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone myself, another reason for Beverly to mock my retardedness. Winslow answered after the third beep. His voice sounded as energetic as I remembered, even though he was in his 60s. "Winslow Callahan here." "Winslow, this is Noel Fontaine. I'm calling about Odell Lamont. He's with me right now." "Odell?" Winslow sounded surprised. "Don't tell me you finally decided to show the world that painting." "That's what I wanted to talk to you about," I said, taking the phone from Noel. I've been having some complications. I need an official appraisal and maybe a quick sale." There was a pause, then Winslow spoke up. "I always knew this day would come. But why now, after all these years?" I briefly explained the situation with Beverly in the garage. Winslow listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "I understand," he said when I had finished. "The situation does require quick action. I can organize an examination as early as next week. I have contacts at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and at Christie's. But first I need to take another look at the painting." "That can be arranged," I said. "But I have to be careful. Beverly mustn't suspect anything." "When can you show me the painting?" I wondered. Beverly usually left on Wednesdays for her book group meeting, though I suspected she actually went out to play. "Wednesday," I said. 14 o'clock. Beverly wouldn't be home." "Great," Winslow said. "I'll be at your garage at 14. And Odell," he paused, "if the painting is what we think it is, it'll be a sensation in the art world." After the conversation with Winslow, Noel and I had a long discussion about the details of the upcoming operation. It was necessary not only to organize the examination and possible sale, but also to safely remove the painting from the cache. "Do you remember how the mechanism opens?" Noel asked. "It's been years." "Of course," I nodded. "Bryson made it so I'd never forget. You turn the old tuning knob on the radio to a certain frequency, then push the third book on the shelf and pull the bracket under the workbench at the same time. The wall would move away, revealing access to the vault." Noel shook his head with a smile. "A real spy stash. Bryson was a genius." "Yeah," I agreed sadly. "It's a shame he's no longer with us." Bryson Tilney had died 8 years ago of a heart attack, taking the secret of the mechanism with him. Noel and I were the only ones who knew how to access the painting. "What about the lawyer?" Noel asked, changing the subject. "We need to change your will as soon as possible." "I had a good lawyer, Sebastian Cole," I said. "But he retired. I don't know who took his place." "I know a reliable person." Noel stood up and walked over to the bookshelf where he pulled out a business card. "Veronica Price. She's been helping me with the store's business. Very competent and, importantly, good at keeping secrets." I took the card and nodded. "I'll call her tomorrow." Noel showed me to the guest room, a cozy space with a large window overlooking a quiet street. There was a comfortable bed, a desk, and a bookcase filled with classics. "Make yourself at home," he said. "Make yourself at home. The bathroom's across the hall, and you can use the kitchen anytime." "Thank you, Noel." I put the suitcase on the bed. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You would have made it," he smiled. "You're stronger than you think. Now get some rest. I'll have to call the lawyer tomorrow and work out the details of the meeting with Winslow." Left alone, I began to sort through the suitcase, organizing the few things I had into the drawers of the dresser. At the very bottom of the suitcase was a framed photograph of me, Roxanne, and little Beverly on a picnic in the park. We were all smiling, happy, and carefree. It was a year before I got the picture and everything changed. I stared at the picture for a long time, remembering the days when I was just a father and husband, not the custodian of a priceless treasure. Perhaps things would have gone differently if I hadn't kept my discovery from my family. If I had told Roxanne about the painting, if we had decided together what to do with it. But the past was gone. Now I had to think about the future. The next morning I called Veronica Price and made an appointment for Friday. Then Noel and I discussed the details of the operation to retrieve the painting from the garage. "We'll need transportation," Noel said. "Something inconspicuous, but big enough for the painting." "Winslow has a van," I remembered. "He uses it to transport artwork. It keeps the temperature and humidity just right." Noel nodded, jotting something down in his notebook. "Okay, I'll call him again and get the details. And you, my friend, need to rest. The last few days have not been easy." I didn't argue. Age was taking its toll. After all the excitement, I felt exhausted. While Noel dealt with organizational issues, I sat in a chair by the window, looking at the street and thinking about how one decision made many years ago had shaped my life. Veronica Price's office was located in a small two-story building in Herndon's business district. The austere legal counseling sign and the neat shutters on the windows inspired confidence. I arrived 15 minutes early, an old habit I'd never gotten rid of over the years. The reception area was decorated in restrained colors: beige walls, dark brown furniture, a few live plants, and a rack of legal literature. Behind the reception desk sat a young woman with neatly gathered hair and an attentive gaze. "What can I do for you?" she asked as I approached. "I have an appointment with Miss Price." Odell Lamont. The secretary checked the computer records and nodded. "Yes, Mr. Lamont, for 15 o'clock. Miss Price will be free in a few minutes. Please have a seat." I sank into a comfortable chair and picked up one of the magazines from the desk. My thoughts were far away in the garage where Winslow, Noel, and I had examined the painting yesterday. Winslow was delighted. His professional eye immediately confirmed what I had known for a long time. It was an authentic Caravaggio, probably one of his early sketches for the famous Martyrdom of St. Matthew. "Odell, this is incredible," Winslow whispered, examining the painting carefully under a special lamp. "How have you managed to keep it in this condition all these years?" "Humidity and temperature control," I answered then, "and regular preventive maintenance." Winslow assured us that the painting could be worth millions if its authenticity was officially confirmed. He promised to organize an examination with specialists from Christie's, but warned that the process could take several weeks. "Mr. Lamont?" The secretary's voice brought me back to the present. "Mrs. Price is expecting you." Veronica Price was an energetic woman in her 50s with a short haircut and attentive dark eyes. She rose from the table to greet me and shook my hand firmly. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Lamont. Noel has told me a lot about you." "Only good things, I hope," I smiled, taking a seat in the chair across from her desk. "Absolutely," she smiled too, but then her face turned serious. "So, what can I do for you?" "I need to change my will," I said bluntly. "I only have one piece of real estate, a garage on the outskirts of town. In my previous will, I left it to my daughter, but now I want to change the heir." Veronica nodded, making notes in her notebook. "It's not difficult. Do you have the deed to the garage with you?" I pulled a folder of documents out of my jacket pocket and handed it to her. "Great," she said, after a quick glance through the papers. "And to whom do you want to leave this garage?" "Noel Fontaine," I answered. "And I'd like the will to clearly state the garage with all its contents." Veronica looked up from the papers. "With all its contents? Is there anything of value in the garage?" I paused, deciding how much to tell her. "Some personal items of sentimental value to me are stored there. I want to make sure they get into safe hands." She nodded, not asking any more questions. "I see. Don't worry. We'll draw up the will so that there are no legal loopholes. The garage and all its contents will go to Mr. Fontaine." We spent almost an hour discussing details and wording. Veronica proved to be a competent lawyer, scrutinizing every paragraph of the document. Finally, the new will was ready. "That's it," she said, handing me the document for my signature. "Sign here and here. I will act as a witness and my assistant as a second witness, as required by law." I took the pen and signed the document, feeling strangely relieved. It was as if the enormous burden I had been carrying all these years had lessened a little. "Thank you," I said when the formalities were completed. "You've been very helpful." "That's my job," Veronica smiled. "And let me give you a little advice. If there really is something valuable in the garage, it might be worth considering a trust fund or other financial instruments. It might be more tax efficient." "I'll think about it," I nodded, even though I knew I didn't have time for such complexities. The main thing was to make sure the painting didn't fall into Beverly's hands. As I left Veronica's office, I didn't realize that the information about the change in the will had already begun its journey to my daughter. I later learned that Veronica's assistant, Lindsay Ames, was a close friend of Tracy Parker, who in turn often played poker with Beverly. Small town, small secrets. I was back at Noel's shop in time for lunch. My friend was busy with a customer, an elderly gentleman who was looking for a first edition of Dickens. I quietly went up to the apartment, not wanting to disturb him. In the apartment, I pulled out the phone Noel had bought me, a simple model with large buttons, perfect for an older man. I put it on the table and made myself some tea. A strange calmness took over me. For the first time in years, I felt in control of the situation. Noel came upstairs about an hour later. "How did it go?" he asked, coming into the kitchen. "Great," I replied, handing him a copy of the will. "The garage and all its contents are yours now, at least. They'll be yours when I die." Noel ran his eyes over the document and nodded. "I hope that happens very soon." He set the papers aside. "What about Winslow? Any news?" He called while I was at the lawyer's. Left a message saying the preliminary examination is scheduled for next week. They're bringing in experts from New York. "That's great." Noel sat across from me. "What are you going to tell Beverly when she finds out about the will?" I shrugged. "The truth, that the garage belongs to me and I have the right to use it as I see fit." "She'll be furious," Noel warned me. "Let her be." I sipped my tea. It would only be a small part of what she deserved. We spent the rest of the afternoon discussing the details of the upcoming appraisal and the possible sale of the painting. Winslow tentatively estimated it at several $1,000,000, but warned that the exact amount would depend on many factors: the condition of the painting, its provenance, ownership history, and the current state of the art market. The call came in the evening when Noel and I were playing chess. The phone on the table next to me vibrated, and Beverly's name popped up on the screen. I showed the screen to Noel, and he nodded understandingly. "Should I come out?" he asked. "No, stay." I took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. "Yes, Beverly? Did you change the will?" Her voice sounded high and strained. "You took me out of the will for this bookseller?" I wasn't surprised she already knew. Herndon had always been a town where news spread faster than wildfire. "Hello, Beverly," I said calmly. "Yes, I've changed my will. The garage now goes to Noel." "But why?" Her voice was a mixture of anger and confusion. "It's just an old garage. You always said it would be mine." "You kicked me out of the house," I reminded her. "Demanded my pension. What makes you think you deserve anything from me?" There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Beverly spoke again, her voice shaking. "Dad, I was upset. I didn't mean to," she stammered. "Vince threatened me. I was desperate." "And she decided to take it out on me," I finished for her, like I'd done so many times before. "But the garage," she changed tactics again. "Why would your friend need it? It's just an old structure with junk in it." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "If it's just an old junk building, why do you care so much that you don't get it?" Because it's all you have," she exclaimed. "It's the only thing you could leave me." "Do you deserve anything from me?" I asked quietly. "After all these years of humiliation and demands?" There was silence again. I could hear Beverly breathing heavily. "There's something there, isn't there?" she asked suddenly. "In the garage. Something valuable. That's why you always refuse to sell it." I felt my heart skip a beat. Beverly had always been smart when it came to money. "The garage holds my personal belongings," I said in an even voice. "Tools, books, photographs. Things that have value to me, but are hardly of interest to you." "Don't lie to me," she shouted. "I know you, Daddy. You wouldn't treasure old junk like that. There's something in there, and I have a right to know what it is." "You don't have any rights, Beverly." My voice remained calm, even though I was seething inside. "The garage belongs to me, and I decide who I leave it to." "I'm your daughter." Her voice broke. Your only daughter. How can you leave everything to some stranger? Noel isn't a stranger, I said quietly. He's been there for me all these years, supported me when you were only thinking about your bets and debts. I'll come, Beverly said suddenly. I'll come right now and we'll talk face to face. No, I said firmly. Don't come. I don't want to see you. You can't forbid me, she screamed. I'll find you and you'll explain everything. Why you cut me out of the will, why you left the garage to him. I looked at Noel, who was listening intently to the conversation. He nodded slightly, signaling that he would support whatever decision I made. Okay, Beverly, I said. Do you want to know why I changed the will? Because you don't deserve anything from me. For years you've treated me like an ATM machine, constantly demanding money for your bets. You humiliated me, threatened to kick me out of the house. And finally, you did it. So why should I leave you anything? There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Beverly spoke, and her voice sounded strangely calm. I'm going to find out what you're hiding in that garage anyway, Dad. And when I do, you're going to regret doing this to me. She hung up before I could answer. I slowly put the phone down on the table, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. She's guessing, Noel said, breaking the silence. She thinks you have a secret. Yeah, I nodded. Beverly's always been perceptive. But she won't find the stash, not even if she took the whole garage apart. We still need to speed things up. Noel stood up and started pacing the room. I'll call Winslow. We need to get the painting out as soon as possible. I nodded, feeling the tension stiffen my muscles. Events were moving faster than I had anticipated. Beverly wouldn't stop until she knew the truth, and when she did, I didn't even want to think about what she'd do for money. Are you okay? Noel asked, noticing my condition. Yeah, I tried to smile. I just didn't expect it to happen so fast. We can handle it, Noel said confidently. We have a plan, we have Winslow, we have legal protection in the form of a new will. There's nothing Beverly can do. I nodded, though my gut told me it wouldn't be that easy. I knew my daughter too well. When it came to money, she was willing to do anything. I spent the night after talking to Beverly restlessly. Sleep came and went, leaving me alone with troubling thoughts and memories. I thought about the painting, about my daughter, about the years when we had been a normal family before gambling had consumed Beverly, before Roxanne had left, unable to bear the constant scandals. At breakfast this morning, Noel noticed my condition. You look tired, he said, pouring me a cup of coffee. Didn't sleep? I didn't sleep well, I admitted. I've been thinking about Beverly. Maybe I should tell her the truth. Noel stirred his tea thoughtfully. About the painting? Are you sure that's wise? I don't know, I shrugged. But she suspects something anyway. Perhaps it's better to tell her yourself than to let her find out by other means. And what do you hope to accomplish with that? Noel asked. Do you think that once she knows the painting's value, she'll suddenly change? Stop acting? Start treating you like a human being? I shook my head. No, of course not. Beverly won't change. But I want her to realize what she's lost because of the way she's treated me. I want her to realize the cost of her actions. Noel looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I understand. It's your decision, Odell, and I'll support you, whatever it is. At that moment, the phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was Beverly again. Hello? I answered, preparing myself for another stream of accusations. Dad, her voice sounded unusually soft. I want to apologize for yesterday. I was too harsh. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. Beverly never apologized for nothing. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she continued, and I realized I was wrong. You've done so much for me, and Her voice shook. I was a terrible daughter. What do you want, Beverly? I asked you bluntly. Why the spectacle? A pause, then a heavy sigh. I want to talk to you, face to face. Can I come over? I looked at Noel, who was listening intently. He shrugged slightly, leaving the decision to me. "Okay," I said finally. "Come to Noel's house at 3 in the afternoon." "Thank you, Daddy." I could hear the relief in her voice. "I'll be there at 3." I hung up the phone and looked at Noel. "She's up to something." "Definitely," he nodded. "Be careful, Odell. Don't let her manipulate you." "Don't worry," I grinned bitterly. I'd long ago learned to recognize her games. Beverly arrived at 3 o'clock sharp, as promised. She looked better than the last time I'd seen her, neatly dressed, lightly made up, hair styled. Apparently she wanted to make a good impression. Noel met her downstairs and escorted her to the apartment, where I waited in the living room. When Beverly walked in, I noticed her nervously clutching her purse. "Hello, Daddy," she said quietly. "Hello, Beverly," I replied without getting up from the chair. "Have a seat." She sat down on the couch across from me. Noel apologized delicately and went out, leaving us alone. "How are you?" Beverly asked, trying to make casual conversation. "Not bad," I replied briefly. "Noel's a good host." She nodded, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "Dad, I really want to apologize. I wasn't myself when I kicked you out. Vince threatened me, and I panicked. And decided to take it out on me," I finished for her. "I know the story, Beverly." She lowered her eyes. "I know I've often been unfair to you, but I'm your daughter, and I love you, Daddy." Those were words I hadn't heard from her in years. They should have moved me, but instead they only made me more suspicious. "Why did you come, Beverly?" I asked her bluntly. "Let's not make any of these introductions." She sighed, realizing her tactics weren't working. "Okay, I want to know why you care so much about this garage. What is it about it that I don't know?" I stared at her for a long time, making a decision. Then I said slowly, "There's a painting in the garage, a Caravaggio original." Beverly stared at me, her eyes widening in surprise. "What? What Caravaggio? Are you kidding?" "No," I shook my head. "It's not a joke. Many years ago, I received this painting as payment for restoration work. The man who gave it to me thought it was a good copy, but I realized almost immediately that it was the original." "And you kept the original Caravaggio in this old garage all this time?" Her voice shook with disbelief. "I didn't just keep it." I allowed myself a slight smile. "I created a special temperature and humidity-controlled vault. The painting is in perfect condition." Beverly leaned back on the couch, trying to make sense of what she'd heard. "How much is it worth?" That was the big question. Money was the only thing my daughter was really interested in. "According to Winslow's preliminary estimate, several $1,000,000, I answered calmly. "Probably more. The official forensics will tell us more precisely." Beverly turned pale. Her hands trembled and she clasped them together in her lap. She whispered, "And you never told me that? All those years when I was struggling with debt, you were sitting on millions?" "I wasn't sitting on millions," I objected. "I was keeping a piece of art that has tremendous cultural and historical value. And yes, I never told you about it because I knew you would immediately demand to sell it to pay your debts. And then you'd lose that money too." Beverly jumped up, her face contorted with anger. "You had no right to keep this from me. I'm your daughter, your only family." "Family?" I stood up too, feeling the anger rising in me. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me all these years. Family doesn't demand money under threat of eviction. Family doesn't humiliate or insult." "But you are my father," she screamed. "You were supposed to help me." "I did," I said quietly. "For years I gave you part of my pension, endured your insults. I lived in your house as a squatter, even though I could have bought my own house if I'd sold the painting. I did all this because I hoped that one day you would change, that your gambling addiction would let you go." Beverly fell silent, looking at me with a mixture of shock and fury. Then her face suddenly changed, softened, and she sank back down onto the couch. "Dad, I, I really have been a terrible daughter, but I can change. I really can. Just give me a chance. I shook my head. It's too late, Beverly. I've changed my will. The painting will belong to Noel. But that's not fair, she flared up again. He's not even related to you. And I'm your daughter. The daughter who kicked me out of the house, I reminded her. The daughter who treated me like an ATM machine for years. What makes you think you deserve that painting? Beverly bit her lip, clearly trying to contain her anger. Then she spoke slowly, with feigned sadness in her voice. I realize I hurt you, Daddy, and I'm truly sorry for that. But don't you see? This picture could change everything. I could pay off my debts, start a new life, maybe even get treatment for addiction. I looked at her, trying to see this woman as the little girl I once loved more than anything in the world. But all I saw was a skilled manipulator willing to do anything for money. If you really wanted treatment, you would have done it a long time ago, I said. I've offered to help you many times. You've always refused. But now I'm ready, she exclaimed. I swear to you, Daddy, just put me back in the will, please. I shook my head. No, Beverly. My decision is final. The painting stays with Noel. Her face changed instantly, the mask of sympathy and remorse fading away to pure rage. You'll regret this, old man, she hissed. I'll find that painting. I'll break into the garage and take what is rightfully mine. Break in, I said calmly. Only, it won't help you find the painting. It's hidden in a special stash that only I, Noel, and the late Bryson, who created it, know about. Without knowing the mechanism, you won't find anything but old tools and things. Beverly turned even paler. You're bluffing. Check it out, I shrugged. Take the garage apart brick by brick. You won't find the painting. She looked at me with hatred. I can make you tell me where it is. I can call the police, tell them you stole a valuable painting. The painting legally belongs to me, I replied calmly. I have documents proving that I received it as payment for the work. But breaking and entering into someone else's property is a crime the police would be interested to know about. Beverly stood up, her hands shaking with anger. This isn't over, she promised. I will find a way to get what is rightfully mine. Nothing belongs to you, Beverly, I said tiredly. Not by right, not by law, not by justice. She grabbed her purse and headed for the exit, but stopped at the door and turned to me. You know, I always thought you were weak, a pathetic, worthless old man who'd never amounted to anything in life. Turns out you're just a liar and a manipulator who hid millions of dollars from your own daughter. I looked at her calmly. Think what you want, Beverly. But remember, if you had treated me like a human being, things might have been different. She slammed the door so hard that the glass in the bookcases shook. I was left alone, feeling a strange mixture of relief and bitterness. I'd finally told her the truth I'd kept for decades, and though her reaction was predictable, part of me still hoped for a different outcome. Noel returned a few minutes later carrying a tray of tea. I heard the door slam, he said. I guess the conversation didn't go well. As expected, I sighed. She tried to manipulate me, to act remorseful, and when she realized it wasn't working, she threatened me. Threatened me with what? Noel put the tray on the table and sat down next to me. Garage break-in, police. I shook my head. Standard stuff. But she wouldn't find the painting even if she did break into the garage. We need to speed up the extraction process anyway, Noel said thoughtfully. Now that she knows the painting's value, she can do anything. I nodded in agreement. Yeah, you're right. We need to contact Winslow and arrange transportation as soon as possible. Noel was already pulling out his cell phone. I'll call him right now. I think he can come with the van as early as tomorrow. While Noel talked to Winslow, I sat in the chair, thinking about the conversation with Beverly. I was bitter to realize that my only daughter had turned out to be capable of nothing but hate and greed. There was not a shred of love or gratitude, only a desire to get money at any cost. I remembered how many years ago, When Beverly was a little girl, I had taken her to the museum, showing her the paintings of the great masters. She listened to my explanations with interest and asked questions. Who would have thought that this inquisitive girl would turn into a woman who sees a priceless work of art as just a way to pay off gambling debts? "Winslow will arrive at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning," Noel said, ending the conversation. "He has a special shipping container for the painting." "Great," I nodded. "The sooner we get it out of the garage, the calmer I'll be." "Don't you regret telling Beverly the truth?" Noel asked cautiously. I thought for a moment. No, I don't regret it. She deserved to know what she'd lost because of her attitude toward me. And I'm glad I'm finally out of the closet. It was like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Noel nodded understandingly. "Secrets tend to get heavier over the years, but now we have to be extra careful. Beverly won't back down that easily." "I know." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. "But what can she do? The painting is safely hidden, the garage is in my name, the will has been changed." "She could try to prove your incapacity," Noel said thoughtfully, "or accuse me of manipulating you for the inheritance." I grinned. "Let her try. We have Veronica Price to prove that I was in my right mind when I changed the will, and after all, I have every right to dispose of my estate as I see fit." "Yes, legally we're protected," Noel agreed. "But Beverly could do more than act legally." I knew he was right. My daughter was unpredictable, especially when it came to money. But for the first time in a long time, I felt in control. No more secrets, no more compromises. "We'll meet Winslow at the garage tomorrow at 10, I said. "We'll remove the painting and move it to a safe place, and then let Beverly do what she wants. Without the painting, the garage is just an old structure full of junk," she always thought. Noel smiled and raised his cup of tea. "To new beginnings, my friend." I raised my cup in return. To new beginnings. The next 2 weeks became a war of nerves. Beverly, having learned of the painting's value, acted with the desperation of a man who sees millions slipping through his fingers. First, she tried to bribe Noel by showing up at his store with an envelope full of cash. $50,000, she said, placing the envelope on the counter. "I borrowed it from someone I know. It's all I have. It's yours if you get my father to put me back in his will." Noel didn't even look at the envelope. "Go away, Beverly. Neither I nor your father is interested in that money. But you do realize that the painting must belong to me," she insisted. "I am his daughter, his blood. You're just a stranger. A stranger who was by your father's side when you were thinking only of your bets," Noel replied calmly. "Now please leave. I have buyers." After a failed bribery attempt, Beverly moved on to more aggressive methods. One night the alarm in the garage went off. Noel, Winslow, and I arrived there at the same time as the police and found signs of forced entry. Someone had tried to pick the lock. Luckily, they didn't get inside in time. "Do you think it's Beverly?" Noel asked after the police had left. "Not by herself, of course," I shook my head. "Probably hired someone. But it doesn't matter. The painting was gone, and it was true. The day after I'd talked to Beverly, Noel, Winslow, and I had safely removed the painting from its hiding place and transported it to a special vault in Washington, D.C., where the artwork was kept under perfect conditions and guard. Beverly, however, was unaware of this and continued her attempts. 2 days after the failed break-in, she sent a man to Noel, posing as a private detective. "Miss Lamont is concerned about her father's mental health," he said, showing his ID. "She believes he's under your influence and is unaccountable for his actions in changing his will." Noel remained icily calm. "Mr. Lamont is in perfect health, both physically and mentally. His decision to change his will was made on his own and with full understanding of the consequences. If Miss Lamont has any doubts, she can contact the lawyer who drew up the documents or the doctor who examined Mr. Lamont recently." The detective left with nothing, but I realized that Beverly would not stop. Indeed, her next move was to try to break into Noel's apartment while we were out. Fortunately, the alarm went off and the police arrived and detained two men who, as it later turned out, had been hired by Beverly to search for important documents. All of these events only convinced me that I had made the right decision. My daughter was ready to do anything for money, even a crime. What luck that the painting was already safe and was being examined under the supervision of specialists from Christie's. Winslow called almost every day with updates on the progress of the appraisal. The news was terrific. Initial tests confirmed the painting's authenticity. Analysis of pigments, style, technique. Everything indicated that it was indeed a work by Caravaggio. "It's not just a copy or an imitation," Winslow said excitedly. "It's an early sketch of the martyrdom of St. Matthew by the master himself. He may have used it as a preparatory work before creating a large canvas for the Contarelli Chapel, or it could have been an alternative version rejected by the client." "And how much could it be worth?" I asked, although money interested me much less than the fact of discovery of an unknown work of the great master. "According to preliminary estimates, from $10 to $15 million, answered Winslow. "But at auction the price may be much higher. This is not just a painting by Caravaggio. This is an unknown, previously uncatalogued work, a true discovery in the art world." I sat there stunned by the amount of money. All these years I had kept a veritable fortune in my modest garage. And although I always knew the painting was valuable, the actual figures were staggering. "We're organizing a press conference in a week," Winslow continued. "We'll announce the find, present the forensic results. It'll be a sensation, Odell. You're going to be famous." Celebrity was the last thing I wanted, but I knew I couldn't do without publicity. It was important to establish the provenance of the painting, to explain how it had come to be in my possession, to avoid any suspicion of illegal acquisition. "Okay," I agreed. "But let's avoid unnecessary details about my personal life." "Of course," Winslow assured me. "Only the facts relevant to the painting." The press conference was held at the National Gallery of Art in Washington. I have never been the center of such attention. Dozens of journalists, cameras, camera flashes. Sitting next to me were Winslow and the director of the gallery, as well as experts who had conducted research on the painting. "We are pleased to announce an amazing discovery," the gallery director began. "A previously unknown work by Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio, one of the greatest Baroque masters, has been discovered in a private collection in Herndon, Virginia." Winslow detailed the results of the examination, showed slides with microphotographs of the paint layer, results of spectral analysis of pigments, and X-rays. All the evidence confirmed the authenticity of the painting. Then it was my turn. I briefly explained how I had received the painting from a bankrupt client many years ago, how I suspected its value and decided to keep it. "Why didn't you show it to the experts earlier?" one of the journalists asked. "Sometimes a work of art becomes not just property, but a part of life." I was a restorer and I understood the value of the painting, its cultural significance. I created the conditions for its preservation and I just enjoyed having it. It's hard to explain. My answer seemed to satisfy the journalists. No one dug deeper, asking about my family or the reasons why I decided to sell the painting now. After the press conference, a Christie's representative approached me. "Mr. Lamont, we would like to organize an auction for your painting. Given its historical and artistic value, we expect very high bids." I agreed, and the auction date was set a month in advance. This time was needed to prepare catalogs, organize a pre-show, and attract potential buyers from all over the world. News of the discovery of an unknown Caravaggio traveled around the world. I was invited to television, asked to give interviews for newspapers and magazines. I refused most offers, accepting only those that dealt exclusively with the painting, without delving into my personal history. Beverly found out about the press conference from the news. She called me that same evening, her voice shaking with rage. "You put the painting up for auction? Without my consent?" "I don't need your consent, Beverly," I replied calmly. "The painting belongs to me. I am your daughter," she screamed. "I'm entitled to some of that money." "No, you are not," I said firmly. "Not by law, not by conscience." "I'll sue," she threatened. "I'll prove that you're incompetent, that this friend of yours is manipulating you." "Please," I shrugged, though she couldn't see the gesture. "All the experts I've talked to lately can attest to my sanity. And the press conference you must have seen leaves no doubt about my mental faculties." Beverly launched into a torrent of profanity, but I just hung up. Her threats didn't scare me anymore. I had the support of Noel, Winslow, the lawyers at Christie's. I was no longer a lonely old man to be intimidated and humiliated. The auction exceeded all expectations. The painting was sold for $22 million to an anonymous collector from Europe. After paying the auction house commission and taxes, I was left with about $16 million, a sum I could never have imagined. "What are you going to do with that kind of money?" Noel asked, as we celebrated the successful sale in his apartment. I thought, I'll give most of it to charity, to foundations that support young artists and restorers, maybe a Bryson Tilney scholarship for art conservation students. "And for yourself?" Noel smiled. "I'll buy a small house somewhere by the sea," I smiled back. "I've always wanted to live by the ocean, and of course I'll travel. There are so many museums I'd like to visit, so many paintings I'd like to see in person." "Sounds like a great plan." Noel raised his glass. "Here's to a new life." We clinked glasses, and I felt a warm wave of contentment spill over my body. All those years of secrecy, all the sacrifices and compromises were all in the past. A new chapter of life lay ahead, filled with opportunities I'd never dared to dream of. The final confrontation with Beverly happened 2 weeks after the auction. I decided to pick up the rest of my belongings from her house to finally close that page of my life. When I pulled up to the house, Beverly was on the porch as if waiting for me. She looked gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes. Her hands were trembling slightly, a sign I knew well. She'd lost again. "Come to gloat?" she asked in lieu of greeting. "No," I shook my head. "Just to get my stuff." "Your millions won't make you happy," she said bitterly, following me into the house. "It's not about the millions, Beverly." I started picking up books from the living room shelf. "It's about freedom. Freedom from fear, from humiliation, from having to hide and lie." "What about family?" Her voice was shaking. "I'm your daughter, no matter what happens." I stopped and looked at her. Family isn't just blood, Beverly. It's caring, respect, support. All of that hasn't been there between us in years. And you're just going to cut me out of your life, after everything that's happened. What was, Beverly? I smiled sadly. Years of insults and demands? Constant threats to kick me out of the house? Trying to prove my incapacity? Hiring burglars? She lowered her eyes, unable to find an answer. We both knew the truth. "I'm not cutting you out," I said softly. "I'm just going my own way. And I wish you to find your own no gambling, no debt, none of the things that destroyed our family." "It's easy to say that when you have millions," she murmured. "Money doesn't solve all problems." I closed the box of books, especially problems like gambling addiction. "You need help, Beverly, and I'm still willing to pay for your treatment if you really want to change." She looked at me in surprise. "After everything I've done?" "Despite everything, you're still my daughter," I said simply. "And I want you to be happy. But happiness has to be real, not the illusion of a big win that will solve all your problems." Beverly was silent, and I didn't know if my words had accomplished their purpose. Maybe she was just thinking about how she could get the money for treatment and then go back to playing the game. I couldn't control her choices, could only offer to help. I finished packing and headed for the exit. At the door I stopped and looked at my daughter one last time. "Goodbye, Beverly. I'll be in touch if you want to talk. A real talk, without manipulation or demands." She didn't answer, just stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, as if she were cold on this warm spring day. I walked out of the house without looking back and got into a cab where Noel was waiting for me. We headed to the airport. We had a flight to Florida ahead of us, where I was going to check out some houses by the ocean. "How did it go?" Noel asked as the cab pulled away. "As expected," I sighed. "She still thinks she deserves some of the money just because she's my daughter, doesn't realize that relationships are a two-way street." Noel nodded understandingly. Maybe in time she'll realize. Maybe? I wasn't sure, but hope still lingered somewhere deep inside. In the meantime, I looked out the window at the streets of Herndon, the city where most of my life had been spent. Time to move on. The cab pulled onto the highway leading to the airport, and I mentally said goodbye to the past and welcomed the future, unknown, but full of new possibilities. For the first time in years, I felt truly free.